Welcome to the Bass Thug Podcast. In today's episode we talk to Carl Peczynski. Carl is a very prolific electronic musician who has several different projects revolving around 80s and 90s nostalgia. We talk about the Juno 106, Impulse Tracker, vintage computers, playing live with lots of gear, the Elektron Digitone, and Space Jam. You can find more info about Carl and his many projects at planetsaxon.com. It is another Synth Nerd episode that you don't want to miss.
Welcome everybody to the Bass Thug Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, good friend of mine, Carl Peczynski, a virtuoso of all types of music. This guy has so many freaking bands and so many projects and has so much creative output. It's very inspiring. Welcome to the show, Mr. Carl.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Right off the bat, I got a question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Space Jam. What is the allure of Space Jam?
What's not the allure? I mean, that's just fantastic cinematic bliss at its finest. I mean, what else can I say? It takes iconic cartoons and iconic basketball players, and what do you got? Magic. That's what you got.
Do you think they'll ever make a sequel of Space Jam?
I thought I read somewhat recent that they were going to make not actually a remake, an actual sequel, and it's supposed to be like LeBron James or something. I don't know if that was fake or whatever, but apparently people were hyping it up like it was real. I never really looked into it, so.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Carl, do you want to list off some of your many projects?
Sure. I'd say the first one that I really started pushing when I got into electronic music was Oxygen Star. Then I started to just veer off into other genres, and using different mediums to compose on or whatever. So I thought changing my name would be appropriate and whatever, and have the whole theme go with that. So it was Sadness, was like guitar and NES stuff, Adlib, dance music, Doom Cloud, My Two Robo Dads, which I only put one EP out, but I played actually live a lot under that name. Chrome Cobra, which is my Game Boy stuff. It's more the recent. And the most recent is Sleep Creature, which is modular synth lo-fi stuff.
Oh my God.
Oh no, and then there's Steady C, my rap project, which I haven't done in like 8 years.
Okay.
That might be it. And then I have like some actual, I had some actual rock bands, and I'm actually in a new band right now, just getting together some stuff, just, rock live instrument stuff. But I haven't played anything or nothing recorded. That's like in the works. And I think that might be all I think that's it.
Man, that's crazy. When did you start getting into music?
I would say at a very young age. My dad had a guitar. I grew up with a piano in the house. I kind of just messed with those probably from age 5 and up. And I just kind of taught myself until middle school, which I was in band, and I started playing an actual instrument and learning how to read sheet music on clarinet. That was my first instrument I took, I guess, professional lessons or something with the school band, and learning how to sight read and all that. And then I switched over to drums and guitar by 8th grade and into high school. And I played in jazz band, marching band, pit band, pep band, all those sorts of bands in school. Had other like rock bands with friends on and off. And it kind of escalated from there. And then I was into electronic music at the end of high school, and I've been into that ever since. Just been really into that the most. And that probably started in like my senior year, which was like 99, when computer music was, kind of coming to the home, and it was very accessible. So I kind of jumped on that and learned electronic music that way.
Wow. So you didn't choose the music life chose you, I guess. Yeah.
I guess.
So
yeah, I just been doing it. I don't know.
where did the fascination of electronic music come into play? Because if you're traditionally, you're playing clarinet and you're doing all the, sight reading and all the school band stuff, at what point did you start? Cause I've seen your gear collection online on social media and you have some stuff going on, man. What drew you to that? Like, why did you start going towards electronic music?
I think the generic answer is that probably everyone answers this way. When you realize that you can produce, a full track yourself just on a computer, you're not worrying about recording drums or vocal track, or I can't play guitar, I need to get a guitarist in here. Like, there's so many variables to get, more live instrumentation going. But when it's electronic music, and if you have a laptop and have some software, you can get ideas down and get your own original stuff very quickly and yourself with no other musicians and, just solo. So that kind of started it for me because I was able to make full, complete works, myself without even having microphones or learning how to record because it was all done digitally. And then that kind of spawned into, learning how this virtual stuff was made. It's obviously emulated from hardware. So then I kind of wanted to learn about that. So I kind of did it backwards. I guess like most people did that were not born when these synths were out, Well, I was too young to even know what was going on there. But so, I just went backwards and then started learning about the hardware that it came from. And then probably since 2001 or so, I've been, buying hardware, vintage synths, buying and selling and keeping the ones I like. So, almost 20 years. And that kind of brings me to the collection that I have today. A 20-year span.
Do you think that the virtual stuff was like good practice? Like I went to a place around the corner called Synth Palace the other day, and I saw
those pictures. Yeah.
Oh my God, this guy's collection is insane. And he was telling me that like young guys would come in and they would know everything about like a Prophet or like an OBX, but it was like they learned from the VST. And they knew more about the hardware than the guy that actually owned them. Did you find that a little bit when you went from virtual to analog?
Yes, definitely. Because knowing nothing about anything of an oscillator or how anything is generated or signal flow, just going to a website or installing something, whatever, like a VST, like there was a very new thing, and you could have a synthesizer on your computer and you just see knobs and you're like, what is all this? But you just play the sounds that are there and just learn it by ear. That's what I did. You just touch what do you see on the screen and see what changes the sound. So it was a very accessible thing to get started and be exposed to synthesized music without going out and having to buy any type of keyboard or hardware synth at all. Learn it virtually. And then, when I found out I was really into it and wanted to go further, then I could start investing some money into hardware and time and energy into that and have a more, a real hands-on approach. But definitely the digital stuff. Yeah. It definitely helps for someone who is just starting and wants to learn how, the basis of signal flow and synthesis and how that works. There's so much free stuff out there now. There wasn't even that much back then, but now there's tons. You don't even have to, really purchase anything. There's so many free companies out there to get started, or just buying, workstation software comes with a lot of good stuff now for sound design that people put out, professional stuff just with the stuff that's built into the program. You don't need to buy anything. So it's a lot different than it was 20 years ago. It's a lot easier, but still the digital stuff is a perfect stepping stone, to getting into hardware, definitely.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing when you look back and you look at things like Hammerhead and like Rebirth and like all these like shitty, like, well, they were awesome at the time. They were amazing. But now, like you said, you could use not even just crack software. There's like legit, like Synth One, and there's a bunch of like stuff that's free that you could use and you'll be fine.
Yeah, or they're just donation. You throw like a couple bucks on them and it's just a small company. They're just putting out, virtual soft synths, and that's just what they do, and they do it because they love it, and it helps people out get started, definitely, in electronic music.
For hardware, if someone's listening to this and they want to make the leap from like software, let's say they started like a year ago, 2 years ago, what's like a good all-round synth that you would recommend to like a beginner?
I love this question because there's so many different ways to go, and obviously budget, but I love this question because you could, there's a lot of questions to follow up though on something like that. I mean, if someone's transitioning, are they going to spend, I would say sub 500 or go up higher than that. And I usually assume it's going to be sub 500, and there's still, there's a lot of awesome things that you can get for 500. But then the second question is, do you want to be able to play one note at a time or play chords? And that's really the biggest thing, because when you're all these monophonic synths, they're just one note. Those are all the synths that are kind of in that range, 250 to 500. And someone starting out might be discouraged from that because they think they're going to, spend this money, and they're like, why can I only play one note at a time? And just because hardware is expensive, and especially if it's analog, it's even more expensive. So that's what you're going to spend. But, little by little, companies are coming out with a better price point for like polyphonic stuff. But I'm rambling, and my short answer.
No, that's fine. That's good.
My short answer would be, I would say the best synth to get started with is a Dave Smith Instruments Mofo X4.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
I would say, and the other good thing about that, they make the smaller version that you can pick up used, which is just one voice. It's just the Mofo, and it's just a box, like a little box with knobs, no keys or anything, and you can edit from your computer. And that gives you the analog sound. It's just one voice, and they're like $200.
Yeah.
But the Mofo X4 is essentially just four of them. So you have, 4-voice polyphony. And I don't know. I played a lot of synths over the years, and that it just has a phenomenal tone. And the learning curve on it, everything is just right there. You have pretty much a knob for everything. It's very easy to learn. Right out the box, and it has a full editor too. If you're used to the computer thing like I was, I like having a computer editor as well, because if you're already used to navigating and using the mouse and stuff, you can see now the full layout on your computer screen and just MIDI out to the synth, and you can control the whole thing from there and not even have to touch the synth. But part of the fun is touching the synth, but it's all a preference thing. But you could pick up those for like, 700 now. And I would say if someone had a budget of 500, I would recommend that they maybe stretch it a little bit, because it's just phenomenal value. It's a great sound. It's such a reliable synth. My first idea of buying that synth was to have something for live use, because it's small. It's not big like these other, analog polyphonic synths. It's small, it's more compact, it's a little less keys, so it's easy to gig with, and you can design stuff, and it's got a lot of versatility there. And I basically just wanted to kind of mimic the sound of the Juno 106, which is probably my favorite synth of all time, but I'm kind of leery, gigging with that. So I searched for months trying to find something that was more modern, reliable, that can kind of go to that territory of just like, smooth, I don't know, creamy synth sounds or something. Obviously, there's no chorus on it like the Juno, but just that era of, you know, bread and butter analog synth, like mid 80s, late 80s, but with new technology, and it's more reliable because I would be gigging with it. So I would have to work all the time. And, you know, I wouldn't want anything to happen to the Juno, which is a lot more expensive to replace or maintenance than the Dave Smith would be. And I had that for about a year or maybe 2 years now, and the thing is just rock solid. I mean, I played with it a couple times live, and it never let me down. And just hands down, for that price point, I think that's the best sound that I could get for polyphonic analog. Definitely, I would say.
I think if I see a Mofo, I'm going to buy it. You know, someone offered to sell me one a while back, and I was like, this stupid, like, yellow box with a shitty font. I was like, no, that's cool. You can keep your garbage. But, you just sold that to me. I think I'm going to get one next time I see one.
Yeah, definitely that loud yellow graphic. And then they came out with the keyboard version, and it's the same yellow graphic. And yeah, everyone says that about it, but the sound is just great. And then, you know, then they came out with the X4, and it's just 4-voice, and it's the same exact engine. But yeah, if you just want a single voice that's true analog with it's one oscillator but 2 sub oscillators, so it's really 3 stacked on top of each other, and the filter just sounds great. And for bass and lead stuff, I mean, you're golden with that thing, and it's like $200. Yeah, I'd recommend that if that's your budget and you want to just do one voice. I mean, it's not as much hands-on control and knobs to get into that, but I mean, at least it's hardware and it's a real thing. And, you know, you can take it out, just hook up a MIDI cable and you can gig with it. It's small, you know?
Speaking of carrying around a Juno 106, I do believe I saw a video of you in a park with your Euro racks and a Juno. Was that a Juno 106?
Yeah, because that was my backyard. So
okay. Okay, yeah. Because I was like, that is so cool. Like, I would never have thought of bringing that stuff outside. But also, like, I don't know if my balls are big enough to bring my stuff outside. Can you elaborate on that experience? And I think, is this like a theme? Something that you've been doing a lot, or?
No, that was the first time I did that. I just been wanting to perform outside, and I didn't expect to do my backyard at first. I just kind of wanted to do some wooded area. But yeah, I didn't know where to do it, and I already had the song ready, and I just wanted to make a video to just promote the new stuff I was making. So I just set it all up in the backyard and did a couple takes and just posted the best one. But I do want to revisit that idea, and I was hoping to do it this summer, but I mean, time's kind of run out on that, where I did research some areas and found some, you know, like wooded trails that I want to bring my whole, like a setup out. Not too crazy, but, you know, get mobile battery power. I researched that, and you can just set up and like play in the woods. I want to do like a 20-minute set in the woods or something.
Oh my God.
That's what I really want to do next.
That's awesome. So what is it about the Juno 106 that you think, well, I guess you kind of already explained it. It's like the best of the mid 80s, early 90s. In
my opinion, yeah.
Yeah. What are your, like, what do you have for synths right now? Like, what's your setup look like?
For the 80s ones, I have Juno 106. I have a 106S, which is the same model but has speakers built in, like a home version that came with speakers there. I have a couple Ensonics. I have the ESQ1 and the SQ80, and then the rack version, which is the SQM, which I use for live for my. Oh, that was another project I forgot about, was my 80s music, Raleigh Mingwald as well. I do that, and I use all the Ensonic synths. I just use an MPC and Ensonic synths, and that's it. But that's another one of my definitely top 3 is the Ensonic SQ80. And that's a digital synth, but with an analog filter, late 80s. But that tone is it's just great, and it just screams 80s too. So I just love that. What else? I have an Akai AX60, which is kind of like a competitor to the 106. It's a 6-voice analog poly with a chorus built in. My oldest synth I have is a Yamaha CS15. That's an old monophonic analog synth. Kind of competes with like the first early Moogs. But I really like the filter on that. It's like it just because it doesn't sound like a Moog. I think that's why I like it.
Yeah.
It's like an old late 70s synth and like doesn't sound like a Moog. So it's a little unique sounding there. What else? Oh, the FM synths. I'm a big FM synthesis fan. So I have a DX7, the version 2, which is it has more voices than the early edition. I have a TX802. That's the rack version of it. A couple FB01s, which is like the baby version of those. A little 4-op, kind of based off, I think, the Sega Genesis chip. I think, roughly. I have NPC 1000s that I use as my main sequencer for live if I just want drums and to drive other synthesizers. I use that. I also have a couple 2000 XLs, which I've yet to really do anything with, but that's another project I've had in mind to just do like an EP just on a 2000 MPC 2000 XL. I'm hoping to tackle that next. I have the Dave Smith's Mofo. I also have the Tetra, which is an exact like clone of the Mofo, but in a desktop version. So there's no keys, and you can link the Tetra up with the Mofo, so then it gives you 8 voices. They like chain them together, so that expands it to 8. I recently got into modular synth and the whole Eurorack thing, so I have all weird module wacky things over there with that. I don't know how to explain any of that. Like, it's just, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
I think that's the gist of it. Oh, then all my vintage computer stuff too, like and video gaming hardware, like Game Boys that I made some stuff on. I have an Atari 1040 STE, which I haven't really put anything out with either, which I'd like to do someday. I have a couple of C64s, a ton of machines that you can make into MS-DOS machines that I use my Adlib project for. Oh, and another project, Where's Waldo? I forgot about that one too. That's another one I put out a couple albums with, and I'd like to do another one of that. Some MS-DOS laptops that contain the Sound Blaster 16 compatible chip. I have some of those.
You got a lot of stuff, dude. You got a lot of stuff.
I know.
You got. I just want to say for the listeners out there, like Carl is like a museum of decades, like style, like recreation. I don't know if that's like a good way to explain it, but each one of your projects I find tackles like a certain point in time, and it faithfully recreates it. Like your Adlib stuff is great. Or it was the Adlib Tracker, I think it is. You've done Game Boy stuff. You've done all this vintage sounding stuff. The thing I really wanted to ask you was what drew you towards the vintage? What is it about Space Jam? What is it about the Juno 106? Like the FM synths, these old Yamaha chips? Like what? You're like you have a decade that you definitely like. I've never seen you with Massive or Absinthe or anything like that. So what is it that drives you towards that?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, and I guess to put it in words of how I try to make sense out of it, it's like if the DX7 came out in 1930, and like the Juno 106 was like 1938, would I like that era then?
Wow,
I mean, would I like the 30s now? Or is it just because 80s and 90s is pretty much my childhood, and I think it is kind of a nostalgic thing. Like just that sound, that tone is on all these songs. So it relates to the music and then the culture that goes around with it, movies and TV, you know, that I watched, Space Jam and all that. I mean, it kind of is a nostalgic thing, I guess. And then, you know, composing with Adlib Tracker, I mean, I was all into PC games in like late 80s, early 90s, which was like, you know, the era right there where like fantastic games came out. And, you know, they were composed on Sound Blaster cards. So I just grew up hearing that. So I was really excited in like early 2000s when I came across, you know, Adlib Tracker, and it's like, you can compose that stuff now, you know, on the actual hardware. If you just put together a DOS machine and like, you can use those exact sounds and design that they used in like 1987.
Yeah.
So I guess it was a draw there. It was the sounds that I was used to and I grew up with. It's like, wow, now I can create that. Yeah. I need to learn this. And then I didn't care how hard the learning curve was, which that is, you know, one of the hardest things to get into. And I didn't know anything about, you know, really synth design. I didn't have any synths yet at all. I think I just had the Juno 106. That was like the only synth. That was the first synth I bought.
Oh, wow.
When I wanted to get into hardware. And I didn't really know anything about it. It was at Guitar Center. I walked in and I played it for like 2 hours. And it was $300 in like 2002 or something. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'll take a chance on this.
That's pretty good.
Now they're just regarded as like one of the most iconic synth. And I didn't know at the time. I was just like, ooh, it has colors and sliders I could touch. I don't know. I just like the sound. So it's a nostalgic thing. Yeah, it's my childhood. I grew up with it. I hear the sounds. And now I get to create all the stuff that was back then that I heard. So it's partly collecting too, I guess, which, you know, that's a struggle for a lot of people. You just want to collect everything, and then it takes you away from the creating part. So I did, you know, I've been selling a lot as well to just really hone it down to the stuff that I know I will use and I do use. You know, you never know when you're just going to wake up and like, I want to use the AX60 today, and you just make a track with that. And then if you don't use it for another 10 months, I mean, whatever, it's an investment. The stuff's always going to be of value, and, you know, they're just going to go up and they're going to get harder to find. So yeah. I'm pretty much good now. I could say, because rarely I like new technology that comes out, like new stuff. I have, you know, the Mofo, that just because for that reason, I wanted something reliable for live. And I do have a Digitone.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Elektron.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which is just drew me in because of the whole FM synth. And I just love FM synthesis. And that was a really good, I just fell for the ease of how to use it. And it's a sequencer and it's great. So very rarely I buy new stuff. I'm really still into the 80s and 90s, but as of right now, I can say I have you know, I can go in there into the studio and any idea that I have or creativity that I think of, I can pull something out and make it with it. And I don't know. I never thought I would get there. I'm like really appreciative that I have access to all this stuff. And, you know, any idea I have, I can make it happen. I don't have to be like, oh man, I wish, you know, if I only had that,
yeah,
I could do this now. Like, it's not even, I'm like good now. I'm like, consent.
The gear acquisition syndrome is gone.
Yeah. And I totally had that, you know, in the beginning. You just want to, oh, that's a couple $100. Oh, that's a couple $100. And then you don't even use them. You're just stacking them up. And it's like, you just got to step back and be like, wait a minute, like, let me sell these two things and not get something else, or get something that I'm going to use and love, not just to buy. And you know, it gets distracting. And I guess that's why it's been a 20-year process to get there where, and you learn, you know, that because when you're just starting out, this was actually the biggest thing I just realized, you know, you think you need another synth, you know, that you just discovered. And you're like, if you don't know too much about programming yet, you just hear that sound, you hear someone make the sound, he's like, oh, I need to buy that synth.
Yeah.
When you don't even realize you probably have a synth that's like sitting over there on the counter that could make the same thing. But if you're not that deep into the synthesis part yet, you wouldn't know that. So when I started to learn over the years more about sound design and just sitting there and creating, sounds rather than creating a song, just the actual, sound design, then it's like, oh man, these 3 synths I own, I can do all the same thing, on this one, and they pretty much are 99% identical. Why do I need all these? I mean, is it some rarest of the rare that you see one of every 10 years? No, it's not. These are all over the place. They're just, in 80s or 90 cents. So I thinned out ones like that, and I try to keep the ones that have variety and uniqueness to them, rather than redundancy, I guess. And that helped me, thin it down. And now that I know that, I have variety going, and I find that more, I don't know, it helps in the creative process. If you really know the unique differences of your synths that you have, you have an idea in your head, you know what to go to, you pull it out, and you know how to design it on that thing. And I could say over the past 20 years, I mean, that's where it guided me to go, I guess, just messing with this gear and stuff.
I totally agree with the when you learn actual synth fundamentals, you could, like, I remember, like, there was a time where I thought, like, that super saw sound, I was like, whoa, like, I need to get like a Novation V station to do this. But then you realize it's just like a it's like a detuned oscillator, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to spend $2,000. You could do it on literally anything,
Yep.
And I think that's like a really important thing to learn, so at least for your bank account,
Yeah, exactly. Like the first time I heard what the Poly 6 does with like the unison detune thing, where it's like just stacked voices, but they put them out of tune a little bit. There's tons of synths that can do that, but I always thought, like, I need the Poly 6. It does detuned bass, but like, the Mofo does that. I believe it can do unison detune. A lot of stuff does unison detune. So
it's funny that you mentioned that, because I found when I was maybe 17, I got a Poly 6 in a pawn shop for like $100 or $200, and I ended up selling it to this band called the Deers or something. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But I remember the unison was like, it blew me away. I was like, oh shit. And there's like that one sound that kind of sounds like the Jump synth. I think it's like Patch 1 or 2 or something with unison. I just fucking love that, man. But then you realize you could do that on like Synth 1, right?
Yeah, you probably could. Yeah.
Yeah. Vintage computers, why wouldn't you use DOSBox over? I know the answer would be because it's cooler, but I'm curious if there's a difference between using this DOS tracker software on DOSBox or an actual DOS machine.
See, I don't think it would be saying that it's cooler. I think it's actually easier to use an actual DOS machine, because now you're like running this virtual thing inside a modern machine, and you're like all in the box. I guess just because that's what I kind of don't prefer, to use the virtual stuff anyway, because I don't use too many virtual synths at all. I just want to, have them as hardware. That's stuff I can actually use and see and touch or something. And I guess it's just more of the experience of it. And booting up an MS-DOS computer with the actual Sound Blaster card in it, and, typing it in and running it, and you're just hearing it raw off the sound chip. I mean, I don't know. I just prefer that. And it's not even that. I know DOSBox is free, and you can run, anyone who has a laptop, you can run it and you can get going, but it's really not that expensive to get into that anyway. So when I started researching laptops that had the sound card, I didn't know, all I knew was the desktop route. I was like, well, I'm not going to gig with a desktop. That's just too much to think.
Yeah.
So then I found out, there's Sound Blaster compatibles, which is the ESS audio drive, and that's in a bunch of laptops in the 90s for, consumer use that can play all the Sound Blaster actual data, but it's not the actual Sound Blaster chip in there. So you can compose on it and everything. And some instruments do sound a little different if you composed them on a real Sound Blaster 16 card and then played them back on that. There's little differences there. But if you just compose straight on the laptop, I mean, you're good. And that's kind of what I did for the Adlib stuff. I just compose on the ESS audio drive, and I would record those parts into my modern machine, and then I would cut them up and then put them back into Impulse Tracker and then sequence a song. So it's very tedious to do, but it's pretty much, you're like resampling yourself with old hardware rather than, manipulating it on a modern machine. And it's funny because I tried just using the laptop first and not going back to the old machine, just going into a modern machine, like sample some parts from Adlib Tracker, cut them up, and make a song in like FL Studio, add drums to it. And I just didn't like it. It didn't sound right. I don't know why. Like it was stale or something. So when I put them back into the DOS machine, I don't know, like playing back through old mid 90s or early 90s converters or whatever, and like whatever bit rate it goes at, it's like a little less than CD quality, and how it's playing back the samples, it just sounds different, and it sounds I don't want to use the word gritty, but it doesn't add noise, but it adds something to the color,
crunch,
and it adds some crunch there, and then you compress that and it just sounds like awesome. I don't know. I couldn't get that out of a modern machine. It just sounded, I think the modern machine sounded too clean. It was too perfect. It was probably playing back the samples like exactly. So now when you play them back, in technology from 1991, it's doing something to it, like the aliasing you get.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. And it adds character to the sound. So yeah, it's a more tedious project to do, but I've just found the end result I just liked so much more. So I've just always done it that way. And I think that's just always been my approach. I don't care how long something takes me to.
Oh, I think you cut out. Uh-oh.
Not what I like. If it's sounding, I don't know, too general or preset like or generic or something, and has nothing kind of like feel or anything. I don't know. That's just how I don't know. I came to that conclusion that I just like the old gear running through just an old mixer. It adds sound. I mean, just running it through old rack gear, like equalizers. I use all that in my chain, and it's like cheap stuff. It's like cheap old stuff from the same era. And it is just kind of preserving that era and that sound. I mean, it's I don't know. It's a preservation of the era. Yeah, like you said earlier.
Have you ever seen? Do you know Junkie XL? Do you know this guy?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember him? Well, apparently he has a YouTube channel. His YouTube channel is awesome. I never really listened to his music, but his YouTube channel has a bunch of vintage stuff going on, and he does a comparison of every hardware sampler that he has in his studio, and he's got like a bajillion, and he compares them the same sample with like a modern like Contact or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's definitely like observable differences in the sound. And I think the conclusion was that modern software aliases or does anti-aliasing kind of like in Photoshop or something when you have it like smooths out the edges.
Yeah.
And whereas like the old stuff doesn't really do that. So it retains that kind of like that crunch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly my point. And it's it is, I think it is just more of a fun process too, to work with all this old equipment. You could see it, you see what's going on. There's like, it's more visual, hands-on. I just always been more into that part of it. 'Cause it's all about having fun, and you want it to be an enjoyable process. And even though I just described that it's tedious sometimes, it takes a while, but it's still fun because you're like working with equipment and you're making music on it, and you're working with the limitations.
And when you take your time, you tend to spend more time like on the tone. You know, it's the difference between throwing something in the microwave and chopping the onions yourself a lot of the times, you know?
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
I have a question about, how would a person purchase a vintage laptop? Like if I want to get a vintage laptop to run some Adlib stuff. What do I do? Just go on eBay or what?
Yeah, that's what I did at first. And I think I kind of got lucky because it was mid 2000s that I was looking for that. And it was right at that time where if you're buying a laptop from 1998, nobody wanted them.
Yeah.
So it was at that 10-year mark where it's like, oh, I can't do anything with this. It's like kind of old, but not really old. It's not vintage, but it's like out of date. I want a new laptop. These are terrible. So I was snagging them for like $20, like mint condition. Everything works like on eBay. So I was like stockpiling them, and a lot of them has died over the years, but I still have a good collection. And I looked the other day and they really went up in price. If you got a complete one now that works, you're probably spending $100, which is still not crazy compared to a new synthesizer or something, or a vintage synthesizer. And, you know, getting that, you have a full workstation on your hands just with Adlib Tracker or Impulse Tracker or was the NES one, Nerd Tracker or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you have all this access to free software and free, you know, music making tools for $100, and you can gig with it and bring it out. It's small. So it is still worth it, but they're harder to find. I see that I think they're just dying out. They're getting harder to find them in working condition, but I think eBay or locally, I guess, if you do Craigslist and someone just has old computers hanging around and they're just trying to get rid of them maybe, but I think eBay is going to be the only way right now.
Yeah. On YouTube, I noticed that there's like a vintage gaming sort of resurgence, and there's guys that are like reviewing games on like Voodoo 3000s and stuff. So so I think it's like, it might be hard to find one for $20. It was funny because earlier you were talking about, you had a synth that was, sounded similar to the Moog, but you liked it because it wasn't exactly like the Moog. What do you feel about the Polyvox? Because I was thinking a Polyvox would be really cool because it's almost like a Voyager, but like it's a little more harsh.
You mean the Russian Polyvox?
Yeah.
Yeah, those things, I've never got to hear one in person, but from the demos I've heard and people talk about them, I mean, it sounds awesome. And the vintage ones are pretty affordable, and I actually have in Eurorack format like a Polyvox filter, and
cool.
You can. It's a recreation of that using the old Russian chips or whatever, and you can run stuff through it and use the filter, which is like crazy. It gets really, you know, insane if you push it. But the synth itself, I mean, yeah, that would be that's a very unique thing by itself. I mean, that's its own animal. The sound that it has, just the stability of the oscillators has its own, you know, character, and the filter is its most probably pride and joy in the synth is just a Polyvox filter. I mean, people have been recreating that and rebuilding it and putting out on other things for years just because it has this, you know, distinct aggressive sound. I actually have a Shruti as well that Mutable Instruments made, and they had different versions of filters, and you can get them with the Polyvox filter, and I have the Polyvox filter of that as well.
Is the Eurorack like comparable to vintage synth? Because it's modern, but do you find it's as enjoyable, or is it a little out of control?
It can get out of control, yeah. But it's the same approach. I mean, you're basically just building your sound set by each piece now. So, you know, rather than buying a vintage synth from the 80s and you have a full voice right there, you can mix and match together, you know, an LFO from here, an envelope from here, an oscillator from here, and now truly make 100% your own sound by mixing and matching everything and then modulating it. And so it's like infinite possibilities. So you can just keep buying stuff forever. But it's the same approach. Yeah. It's taking building blocks of sound and, designing it 100% how you want to design.
Who are your synth idols?
Synth idols.
John Carpenter.
Well, what?
I said John Carpenter.
John Carpenter is a big one. He probably pushed me into doing more of the 80s stuff as a soundtrack vibe and not having to worry about using synths in like a real song format. Like it's okay to be instrumental, and he likes the SQ80, and that's what kind of, so I looked into it, I think because I read an article or something that he either used it or liked the sound on something. I can't remember what. So I believe that sparked interest for me, and I was like, let me hear this thing. And I was like, oh, I actually love this thing. And that's what sold me on that. But yeah, John Carpenter's definitely up there. Wow, synth people. I mean, Emerson is from Emerson, Lake and Palmer is pretty insane.
Yeah. Targus, great album.
Yep. Man, I can't even think of just synth virtuosos right now.
What about soundtracks?
Oh, yeah. Well, the entire Carpenter catalog is great. I definitely love the more, what do you call it? Because that's the kind of vibe I wanted to go when I made the 80s music, is more like the teenage drama soundtrack vibe. Like, you probably know what I mean by that. Yeah. Like any John Hughes movie and stuff. That's why I kind of took that name, because I like the montage music, like laid back feel. I love that style. I can't even think of any movies that would give a good example of that.
Well, I
like Valley Girl or something.
Yeah,
like that movie.
I asked because just, I don't know, if you're so nostalgia from this era, and I see that They Live posters in the background, and I just was curious. We were talking about trackers earlier. You're talking about Impulse Tracker. Historically, I am a Fast Tracker 2 guy. What is the allure of Impulse Tracker?
It's 64 channels and it's full stereo. Yeah. So that's pretty good for MS-DOS for 1995. I mean, to resample yourself and have full control of stereo panning, and you can automate the panning. So if you do stereo tracks, it's that you actually get 32, which is still a lot of tracks. And some of my songs, I've almost filled them up just from, stereo layering and panning stuff all over the place. But I think that was the main selling point there, because I wanted something that I could mix with Adlib Tracker and sample, so I could put vocal clips or, obviously drums to it, other loops from anything I wanted, and sequence it out and still have access to all the stuff and still play back on a Sound Blaster card and use it live on my laptops. So, I mean, Impulse Tracker is pretty ideal. And, if I had to do quick editing, or if I had the tracks on a modern machine, you can open them up on Schism Tracker, which is the same format, same everything, which is made for Windows. So that was kind of cool too, that if I had to edit for some reason that I couldn't use my DOS machine, or, I wanted to be mobile on a modern machine and I'm like out somewhere and I had to edit the files, I could do that, or transfer back and forth. I mean, or just make an idea on there if I didn't have my MS-DOS computer with me. So that was cool. But it was pretty much the channels and the sample time that you can have, from your memory that you have in the computers. And I do actually like the commands probably better on some other trackers, how they sound like Fast Tracker or Pro Tracker. Just like the slides, I don't know. I like how they do the slides a little bit better. You have to work at it a little bit more on Impulse Tracker. Maybe they don't have a big resolution or something. I don't know what it is, but it's a little different. Like Adlib Tracker is crazy with the resolution on all the commands you do in there and the control you can have over, the FM, the Sound Blaster chip. It's just insane. And you can automate every parameter. It's just the drums, the drums don't really cut it. So that's kind of why I had the idea of resampling myself and then mixing drums with it. 'Cause I could just never make the powerful, like heavy drums
with FM
Tracker.
Yeah.
So I just used sampled ones, and then, now I have a sampler in my hand, so I can use other chords from other things, and I can bring a whole vocal track in if I make it, lo-fi enough that it makes with the sample time and sample that right into, Impulse Tracker, a full vocal track. So it expanded my options, but still kept me limited. But still used the Sound Blaster for playback, just for that tone that I like.
Are you mostly tracker based, or you mentioned Fruity Loops earlier? But I know if you're doing chiptune, you're using LSDJ or something like that, and then you're talking about Impulse and then Adlib Tracker. Are trackers your preferred composition, like your preferred DAW, as they say?
I don't think it would be my preferred. I kind of am open to whatever, and it goes back to what I said before. Like if I like the end result and however I got there, I'm just going to do that. So if I find something that I'm really into and it happens to be a tracker, I'll learn the tracker or do the tracker. If it's something that's uses a piano roll that I'm using MIDI out to one of my hardware synths, I use FL Studio. I pretty much just use that as my main MIDI workstation, and I just have all my synths MIDI connected to it, and I could just control from my computer, and I track that way and record my songs onto my modern computer that way. So I guess I wouldn't prefer either or. It's just, I like both ways. I like both ways to do it, and just whatever's the easiest for what type of gear I guess I'm using at the time, I'll just use that one. Yeah.
So I've seen you play live a few times. What is you mentioned it earlier, you don't want to lug around a PC with fucking Impulse Tracker, especially if you got to take a plane or something like that. It looks weird. What is your preferred live setup? I guess it'd probably be different for each project.
Yeah. And that was another learning experience thing, because you have all these ideas in a studio, and when you have all this stuff, you're like, how can I translate this, to a live show without bringing the whole studio? And sometimes I just gave up and I brought the whole studio. Like I just played a couple weeks ago in Salem, and since I was driving, I didn't have to, take any public transit or a plane, or it was far away. I just loaded my car up and just filled like an entire 12-foot table of everything. And just, I was like, whatever, I could not figure out how to skim it down more. And I already started writing these songs, so I kind of needed everything that was there. It's like, all right, I'm just going to do it this one time. But I really am now, it's in my head to downscale everything. And what can I do with less? And the Eurorack and modular synth stuff is, the opposite mentality of that, because you want to just keep expanding, and it's really hard to get a lot of polyphony or modulation with small setups. But that's like a fun challenge to now build something that can fit in like, a 12-inch suitcase that you can roll out at a gig and make full tracks with. And that's where I'm kind of at now. I'm trying to make a small setup that I could just bring like on a suitcase, or like one rack that could be on a subway, and I could go on a plane or something. And it's easier to manage, when you get to the show and it's all self-contained, and all you do is take the case off and all your stuff is patched and you're ready to go. You just have to make sure you're in tune, and that's it. And that's kind of my goal for the end of this year as well, is to try to get a live rig like that. That's really hands-on, uses modular synth, and some type of sequencer, either the Digitone or like I have NerdSec, which is a hardware tracker based synthesizer thing for Eurorack format, which I really like, and I've been using that a lot. And it's nice to have an external tracker that you can control anything with now. So I do like that. I might integrate that, but it's a lot of trial and error, and then especially the modules you try, and it's like, this one's too big. Maybe if I get half the size, can I still get my point across? No, I have to use this big one, and it takes a while. I mean, I've just been doing this for like 2 years, the modular synth thing, and I don't really still grasp it that well. It's all just figuring stuff out as I go, and I wish I had the mentality of start small when I first started, but you just want to get sound and you just want to get going. Yeah. So you just keep trying to add on more stuff when you really, when you learn about the modules more, it's again, learning about the sound design part that you can do more with less. It's just learning about, how to do it in that way. And it's a learning curve like anything else. But yeah, my goal for the end of this year is as smaller and compact is definitely better. And in the electronic music stuff, I would love to, be able to carry my whole rig with like one backpack and a rack case and just show up with that and be good to go and can do like a full set. Yeah. I would love that. I was always jealous of the Game Boy guys that would come in on a plane from like Australia and like, hey man, ready to play. Let's do a sound check. And and it's like a fanny pack and they have their Game Boy and they're done. Yeah. It's like, man, I have a freaking impulse tracker desktop. I don't know what you guys, I can't get to Australia in this. They're going to be like, what is this computer? What are you doing? And like, so I was like, I need to force myself to learn Game Boy. So then I learned Game Boy like way late in the game, but I did that. Yeah. But I'm just trying to kind of integrate everything I know and I've learned into like a good, solid live project and something that's small and manageable. That's the challenge.
I remember when I found out you could convert RNS files, like the renoise files, to like native XM. And then I tried that, and I was like, oh, I could shave these down to under 2 megs using Fast Tracker. Then I would shave them down, and then I found the Nintendo DS tracker thing. And I was like, fuck this. I'm not bringing laptops anymore, because they would always break on stage, or if you're partying afterwards or whatever, you lose them in a cab. And so, man, I didn't use the DS because it was like chiptune so much as it was just like, I was like, this is a lot easier than carrying stuff, I was wondering, I really want to get a Digitone. I'm very interested in it. Can you sell me the Digitone? Like, what's so great about it?
Yeah, that thing is a powerhouse, and for an all-in-one workstation sequencer, I mean, it's such tremendous value for the price. I mean, obviously the selling point is it's 4-op FM, and it's pretty easy to get into. It's not like learning a DX7. It's very visual. You see a screen, you see what you're editing. I think there's like 3 menu dives, and you just like, you're seeing what you're touching. You're not like blindly have to go through and learn like math or numbers. You're seeing it. It's very visual. And that's why I think the FM part of it there. But aside from that, I mean, getting 4 tracks of FM synth, you also can have 4 tracks of sequencing external gear. So at the same time, so it integrates perfectly with, another hardware synth you have or Eurorack stuff. And the Digitone actually has, inputs on it. So if you're just doing one synth, it has stereo ins. You can run the synth right back into the Digitone and use the effects that are built in on that other synth. Oh, cool. So it's very small and compact, and it can do a lot. And you can do full sets off that. It's very hands-on. It's designed to force you to be hands-on. There's not even a song mode in it. A lot of people have complained at first because you can't, make 9 patterns or something and say, I want to play pattern 1 4 times, pattern 6 3 times. Yeah. You can't even do that. You have to trigger them all on the fly. There's only a chain mode it's kind of like a workaround, but you have to do that on the fly too. That doesn't save in your project. You have to physically say now, as you're playing your track, okay, can you just chain these four patterns together? And it will play those four together, and then the chain will disappear, and then you're just going to be looping forever again. So they really are tailoring to, you have to be hands-on with this thing. You have to interact with it. And I don't really have anything like that, aside from the Eurorack stuff, but the sequencing is really, I guess NerdSec is pretty intuitive, but I mean, I didn't have like, there's no synth that I own that does that. So that kind of justified to have something that's small. It has FM built in, and it can sequence other gear. Or you can just use it yourself. I mean, on itself, you can just have 4 tracks going at one time. It's 8 voices at one time. And you could totally do full sets on just that. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube of just sitting in front of the Digitone, nothing else. And they're just manipulating it all, changing the patterns. They're designing the sounds, you know, in real time. And it just sounds great. And it's been solid for me. And it's just a really good, it's a really good tone, and all in one unit, definitely. Especially if you like FM synthesis. Definitely, yeah.
Well, I was looking at was it the Digitrack? I think it is the other one, but
Digitech,
the Digitech, but it's by recommendation. But I saw the Digitone. I love FM synths. Come on, man, who doesn't? You know. And I was like, and the demos sounded beautiful. Like they just sound like Boards of Canada or something. It was crazy.
Yeah,
very nostalgic.
Totally, you just start with sine waves, and you can do slow LFOs, and it's like instantly can do all those warblies, and it's great. The Digitech is obviously they're a perfect complement for each other. So that's obviously what they designed it for. So you buy both, and now you have a full FM engine and a full sample manipulated engine, and that's just, you know, infinite possibilities now. Now you have a sampler on hand. But if you just want to design and, you know, you actually want an engine, a synth engine that you can design with, I mean, the Digitone they definitely nailed it with that one. I mean, I love that thing.
Carl, the time went by so quick. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Oh, wow, it's already been an hour.
Yeah, that's crazy. The last thing I want to ask you about is the social media stuff. I love your social media. I love your Instagram. I love your YouTube. It's so inspiring when you see, like, you have, like, I think on your YouTube channel, you have like 1 minute, like, kind of jams, I think it is, or 1 minute spotlights.
I'm starting to put those are just carried over from Instagram. So I'm like, oh, why don't I just take the ones that I really like, and make like a synths in a minute thing and just upload those and have like a playlist for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I think one way to fight the gear acquisition syndrome, or I guess maybe help it too, but is to see other people creating stuff with their gear, and then it just makes you want to like go home from work and like just go on your synths, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do the same thing. I watch people on Instagram. I see someone do a video, and then I shut the phone off and I go in the studio and make a jams. It's the same thing, and it's great. It inspires me all day. Yeah.
So where can people find your stuff?
I would say, the kind of main hub that I created was the Planet Zaxxon name that kind of houses all the electronic projects that I do. The main website, I don't really keep up to date as much, like it's planetzaxxon.com. But I mean, that's the easiest thing to remember. And then all my social media links are there: YouTube, SoundCloud, Instagram, Twitter. I'm not really active on Twitter either, but I'm very active on Instagram, which is just at Planet Zaxxon. And it shows all, just clips, stuff I'm messing around with, or if I have a new album out, previews of that and stuff like that. And I also have a Bandcamp for all the releases, which is planetzaxxon.bandcamp. So that'd be pretty much the easiest name to follow. And then all my projects, when stuff happens, they'll be a part of that. So
awesome.
Aside from the other label that I'm kind of starting.
Yeah, I was just about to mention you have an end of year project, the label that you want to talk about that?
Yeah, real quick. I know because we went over.
No, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to just start something that, because I've been getting into mixing and mastering for other people's electronic music and tracks and stuff. So I really like that. Getting to, do that process to other people's music rather than my own. So I was like, let me like put something together where I can put out other people's music and just focus on that too. So I started Guest Services. That's what the name is going to be. And I encourage people to email me and with their tracks and see if it would be, a fit for what I'm trying to do, which is mainly like a laid back, like chill, electronic vibe, kind of like your Boards of Canada or your Aphex Twin ambient works, or like mid 90s warp sound that was like very chill and melodic. Like anything in that vein, I'd be open to listen to, and I would mix and master it if needed, or just master. And I want to put that out, and I would digitally distribute to all the stores. But I really want to get this going, so I'm going to do of some new stuff that I was working on. It's just going to be probably a 4 or 5 track EP. I'm trying to release it before the end of the year, and I'll just launch the label with that, which, I really didn't want to do my own stuff. I wanted to start with somebody else's, but just to kick it off and establish it, I guess, it'll be a Sleep Creature release, and it'll be a laid back, like ambient stuff. The stuff that I performed a couple weeks ago in Salem, I'm just going to finish those up and put it out. So that will be called Guest Services. And you can look for that. Welcome to Guest Services. And that's what it'll be.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Carl. This has been a great interview with lots and lots and lots of synth nerddom going on.
I hope I didn't babble or rabble.
No, man. No way, man. No way. It was perfect. I
could talk about this stuff for years. I love this stuff.
Well, I'll have you back when you launch Guest Services, and we'll push some of the artists on there.
Oh, sounds good. That sounds good. Awesome.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man. Totally appreciate it. And we'll keep in touch.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Take care, man.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Bassfug podcast. Please check us out on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Add us all there. Leave a comment if you're listening to this on YouTube. If you could just leave a comment, tell us what you like, what you didn't like, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. Just communicate with us what's going on. Share with a friend. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, let us know. Hit us up, and we'll work you in, because we just want to promote, cool new music and production. And even if you're like a promoter or you're writing a zine or something, we're just looking for it all. We just want to learn, you could visit the website www.bassfug.com. That's BASSFUG.com, and that's where the blog is. So we aren't doing articles as much anymore. We're just going straight balls to the wall podcasting now. So thank you for checking us out, and add us on social media, and join us next time. Thank you. Bye.